What I am most concerned about in terms of PRC activity, I think I could summarize as Beijing's moral relativism. You see this more recently institutionalized in something like the Global Civilization Initiative, which is the latest in the spate of global initiatives launched by Xi Jinping. Now, on the face of it, the Global Civilization Initiative is about mutual cultural respect. It's aimed at inclusivity and cultural diversity. It advocates the idea that each civilization has a right to tread its own path, something that Beijing has been arguing for a long time. And it's an argument that's driven by fears about Western claims that certain values should be universal. And it's a narrative essentially aimed at countering global support for liberal democracy. Just as one of these other initiatives, the Global Security Initiative, for example, is essentially aimed at countering the US alliance structure. It doesn't actually bring anything substantive to the table. It seeks to negate the status quo, or what we might perhaps a little nostalgically call the liberal international order. So the bottom line for me is that this moral relativism, this non-interference, which is absolutely a cornerstone of Chinese foreign policy, is bad for the world. And I'll admit that we've seen some pretty horrendous things come from the opposite, coming from interventionism in the past decades. And the US and its allies share a lot of blame for undermining faith in the international order. But the world is a better place when it matters whether or not you lock up and murder journalists and opposition figures. And China is contributing to a world in which it increasingly doesn't matter. And this narrative of moral relativism is contributing to a world where it doesn't matter if you do horrendous things. So I'll get a little bit more concrete and closer to my area of expertise, perhaps, which is Belt and Road. I don't think there are debt traps in the sense of countries being lured by China into giving up assets. That's been debunked. And I don't really even think that Chinese companies or institutions are inherently more unsustainable or negatively impactful than other companies. I think it depends on the company and it depends on where they're operating. But the problem is, and maybe what distinguishes China from Western institutions more, is that they are essentially amoral and non-prescriptive, meaning where there is corruption and poor policy making, Chinese institutions have a tendency to exacerbate those problems. So while other financial institutions like the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development come with more prescriptive procedures for things like procurement and requirements for projects to be commercially viable, the Chinese policy banks don't really do that. So the classic example is the $1 billion highway built in Montenegro. Well, not entire stretch of highway, a stretch of highway, 41-kilometer stretch of highway, and this is in a country of 500,000 people. So you can easily do the maths and work out that that's too expensive. And the EBRD, for example, said it was too expensive, suggested an alternative, but the president at the time, Djukanovic, wanted to build a highway, and the Chinese were willing to build it because they got a state guarantee from Djukanovic, and they also got a Chinese company, China Road and Bridge Corporation, to build it. So it was win-win for China. And Beijing also does this. I mean, in Tajikistan is rife with examples where the mafia president gets personal projects built by China. They build them not because they actively like propping up dictators, not because they're evil, but because they operate in a moral vacuum and it's beneficial to them. So to sum up, it may sound funny to complain about the Chinese Communist Party lacking ideals, but in general, what scares me most about how they operate globally is that it is all driven by self-interest without actually much care, much sort of moral concern about how these developments affect people on the ground.